All right, today is Tuesday, February 9th. If you want, you can go out to the P drive. In the in-class folder, there is a folder with today's date on it. You can go out there and copy that folder either to your H drive or to your virtual desktop. There's a bunch of stuff in there that we will go over at least some of it today. This is what's in it. What I did was Chapter 7 has got 9 tables in it, and I basically gave an example of everything that was in each one of those tables. Same with Chapter 8. There's some stuff in there on the DOM. There's some simple examples, and there's some URLs. So again, if you want to go out there, probably would help you to copy that folder over, and I will do the same. I've not yet put it out on Blackboard. I like to wait until class is over and then put something out on Blackboard just in case I have to add anything or anything was mistaken that's in there. All right. So as I open it up and you can see what's in there, first thing I want to do is show you this. There's a simple text file in there that's called reference-URLs. And these are the two URLs that I used for all the information that I put into the Chapter 7 and the Chapter 8 stuff. So this is the HTML. You've got all this stuff. If you copy the folder over, you've got this. So this is the W3 school stuff on the HTML DOM element object. All right. And this simply is, the API for Jquery. All right. So if I do go out to each one of those, so if I go out to them, literally you're going to see the equivalent of all of the information that I put out there, all right, for the presentation today. All right, so if I go out there, and I guess I closed it, but that's okay. All right, the first table that's in Chapter 7 goes over using the HTML DOM element object. And virtually everything that's shown in that table is shown here. Plus, there's a lot more examples that are shown here that are not shown in the table. So, for instance, one of the things that's in there is they talk about the ID. Sets or returns the value of the ID attribute of an element. So if I click on there and I do the try it yourself, this is what I copied out there. So I went and copied, copied over this. All right. And when you click on this, you can see what happens. Okay. Hopefully that's pretty easy to understand. In the Jquery documentation, API documentation, I don't know if you're aware of this. I counted yesterday. And I counted twice, so of course I got 2 different answers. There's either 308 or 309 actual methods that are out here in the API. I started to get to copy in the examples of all of them, and it just was too overwhelming. So what I did was I copied over an example of each one of the ones that are in each table. So you're going to see that in just a minute. In addition, if you've never seen this before, if you go out to javascript.info, all right, literally javascript.info. This is one of the best tutorials on JavaScript that I've ever seen. All right. And for instance, if I go out here to the document and events, this is all different stuff on documents. It's about 50 or 60 pages. This is all the different stuff on events. Here's a bunch of stuff on object-oriented programming. There's regular expressions, because a couple of you had told me that you were still having some issues with regular expressions. So what I did in your pile of junk, or whatever you want to call it, that I asked you to copy over today, all right, under this thing that says DOM, general, All right, that's just literally stuff on the DOM. Let's see. JavaScript.info tutorials. I broke out the events one. So you've got that, and like I said, it must be 50 or 60 pages. Well, it's getting bigger. Come on, keep going, keep going. Well, it's over 100 pages. How's that? And I copied over the DOM tutorial that they had, which again is at least 50 pages, and the object-oriented programming one. So you've got all that stuff if you're interested in taking a look at it. In addition, I found a nice series. This one isn't so good, but the other ones are. That was from Toots Plus, and it's called JavaScript and the DOM series, Lesson 1 and Lesson 2. So I put that out there. Some general stuff. This is some stuff on the DOM, and there's a little bit in here. This is a really good article, The Mystery of the Jquery Object. I like that. And 81 Jquery questions and answers. You may or may not have seen this kind of stuff before, but a lot of different sites put this, out there, and they've got different numbers. Sometimes it'll be 25 Jquery questions, etc. But the idea is if you were going in for a job and the job was to be a Jquery developer, these are the things you'd probably be asked. And it's really extensive. You can see it's 37 pages long. So there's plenty of stuff for you to look at. How's that? All right. So that's the first thing I put in there. I put in this folder here, and I want you to look at this. I just made this up right before a class, and I called it Simple Examples. And we're going to first look at this before we start anything else. All right, and there's 3 files that are in there. I've actually got them open a couple times. But I want all of them in there. So the CSS way, the JavaScript way, and the Jquery way. Now, hopefully you can all look at this. Now it's big enough that you all know how to do this. In other words, you all know how to go in and using style tags, and we could have done this with an external file also. I really should have, but I tried to just put it into one file. All right, so I really should have taken this stuff out and put it in its own CSS file. The point is, by using style tags, should make sense to you that the background color when I run this should be red, and that the H1 tag that's right here should be in white. That should make sense to everybody in here. And you'll notice if I run it, that's exactly what happens. So there's no surprise right there. All right? That's the way that we do it basically using CSS. You can also use it with JavaScript. So notice with JavaScript, what I've done here is I've literally commented out all the CSS. So there is no working CSS in here. But what I did was I put an ID on the body and I put an ID on the H1 so that I could use the document.getElementById. All right? And I'm saying again, set the background to red, set the style, the color rather, of the H1, okay, set that for the title to white. So it looks the same way, except the previous one said this is done the CSS way. This one says it's done the JavaScript way. But you'll notice other than that, they look the same. All right. Then the last one that's in here does it using Jquery. So again, what have I done? Well, I've come in here and I again have commented out all of the CSS. I went in here and added Jquery. I just added the CNN from Google. And then to do that, the same stuff in here just involves this. All right? And so you might say, fine, Danny, what are we supposed to learn out of this? That anything that you do with Jquery, you can do without using Jquery. Anything that you do with JavaScript, you can do with Jquery. Anything you do with CSS, virtually anything, you can do with either Jquery or with JavaScript. All right? So again, if I run this one, all right, so you see when you look at these, CSS way, JavaScript way, Jquery way, they all give you the same result, but they're all done differently. So keep that in mind as we get started, all right? So I've shown you again, this is the W3 Schools site that had all the stuff about the HTML DOM ID property. This is the Jquery API, which, as I mentioned, when you look at this, Like I said, it's got between 300 and 310 different things in there. And this is that tutorial that I recommend that you take a look at. All right? Okay, so that said, let's go to the book. So what we have done so far up till this point is we've gone over everything that was in part 1. So hopefully everybody has a familiarity, a comfort level, etc. with everything. I'm not going to read those to you, but you can look at those and they make sense. Much of what was in there was review. What we're going to do today is we're going to begin part 2. So notice it's 5 chapters long. We're not going to cover all 5 chapters this week. I'm going to go over chapters 7 and 8 today. Just those 2. Then on Thursday, I'm going to go over just chapter 9 because events are a fairly important topic and it's a long chapter. All right. Then a week from today, we'll go over chapter 10. And also at that time, I'll give you your next assignment. And then a week from Thursday, we'll go over chapter 11. So the idea is, hopefully, unless I don't remember if 10 and 11, I don't think they're particularly long or particularly short, but I think there's probably enough that we can do chapter 10 in an hour, then we'll go over the homework, and you'll get an hour of lab. Then we'll do 11 on Thursday, and again, in an hour, and you'll have an hour of lab. Then the following week will be lab. Does all that make sense? So that will get you through this week, next week, and the following week. And we're putting on a pretty good pace right here when you think about it. Because what that means is after 5 weeks, we'll be done with 11 chapters of this book. All right? And then when we come back, whenever that is, 2 weeks, 3 weeks from today, whatever the heck it is, then we're going to go over the next section of the book, part 3. And you'll notice that, we'll hit that 12, 13, 14, and 15 fairly quickly. All right? Then we'll do 16, 17, 18, and 19 fairly quickly. I don't know exactly where that'll put us. All right? But I want us to have time to go through this. This is the last part of the book that's on Angular. Even if we don't end up doing that much work on Angular, so that at least you've gone through it and it'll give me a chance to talk about model view controller architecture. All right? I may have said this to you before, but one of the people on our advisory committee is Steve Zimmerman, who is the CIO, Chief Information Officer at Prent Corporation in Janesville. And when we had our last advisory committee meeting, which was like in September or something like that, what happens is that we go around the table and all the professional people there say what they're looking for, are you teaching this, etc. And one of the things that Steve said was, I want developers who come to Prent to have an idea of what model view controller is. And we don't really talk about it that much. So we will when we get to the Angular portion. All right, so let's start with Chapter 7. If you are following along in the book, we're on page 197. All right. Accessing DOM elements using JavaScript and jQuery objects. So again, what I attempted to show you right there was that there's always multiple ways of doing the same thing. This chapter almost exclusively talks about using jQuery objects to do things. And again, that's why I went out to that api.jquery.com. All right? So you should understand the difference between jQuery objects and JavaScript DOM objects. You should be able to tell if an object is jQuery or DOM, how to get a jQuery object from a DOM object or vice versa, how to use jQuery selectors to quickly find DOM elements. this may be the most important one. All right? It's funny because I'm going through this and I'm trying to figure out, because I'd like us to keep working on this BTC Uber project, but I'm trying to figure out a way that we can do this and incorporate the stuff that's in 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11. All right? So I'm still working on your next assignment. So it says the most important part of dynamic web development is the capability to access DOM elements quickly and efficiently. Again, the DOM, the document object model, it's the thing that gets built behind the scenes for you. And short story or long story short, anything that you have on a website, anything, if you know how to manipulate the DOM, all right, you're able to manipulate anything on a web page. All right. So they say in the following sections, you learn the basic structure of jQuery and JavaScript DOM objects, determine whether an object is jQuery or DOM, and how to switch between them. The rest of the lesson discusses methods that you can use to find and access the DOM elements using jQuery and JavaScript. So again, the first part of the chapter here, as you can see, this table that's on pages 198 and 199. These talk about DOM objects, all right? And they talk about the good and the bad with DOM objects. And they say the good. The advantage of working with these is you have direct access to everything you need to manipulate any HTML element on a page. That's good, because you've got basically the ultimate power on your web page. So that's the good news. Then they say the bad news. And as it says there, the disadvantage is that most of the attached functions and attributes are things that the browser needs, but not necessarily things that you will want to tinker with. So as it says, this means that DOM objects have a lot of properties and methods that almost hurt you rather than help you. So in Table 7.1, they go through several examples of these. Again, I want to mention this, so I'll just show you the parent node as an example. So if you go over to Chapter 7 right here, and you go to Table 7.1, you'll notice that's everything that's in the table. So if I go out to the parent node, for example, the way I set up each one of these was like this. I gave you the URL, all right, and the example right from that website. Okay? So get the node name of a parent node of an LI element. Okay, here's a fast quiz. What should the parent name of, in this case, what should the parent of the UI element of the LI, what should the parent of the LI element be? UL. Yeah. Kind of tough when you give the answer when you ask the question. All right? So notice what they're doing right here. This is the straight JavaScript that they're doing. So they're saying document.getElementById. So we've got to look for my LI, which is right here. All right? Dot parent node. So who's its parent and what's its name? All right? And then where it says demo in this paragraph where there's nothing right now, it says that whatever that name is, we should put it in there. Am I assuming too much that that makes sense to people? That literally what that means is when we click this button, it should run my function, which does what I just showed you. So what should happen when we run this, and I click this right here, it should say, according to Luke, UL. All right? And you see that it does. Again, the example's a little bit contrived, and it's not that big a thing. One thing I will not do, I promise you this, I will not say, okay, I want you to do this example, but I want you to do it using like I just showed you, CSS, and then do it again using JavaScript, and then do it again using jQuery. I think you should use the one that makes the most sense to you. All right? To many of you, that'll mean using CSS whenever you can. Because a lot of people, especially when we start to get more into jQuery, they don't like it. It's too programmy. All right? Plus, they've got functions within functions. Plus, they've got anonymous functions, which are functions without names. All right. Plus, you can take, just like you can in JavaScript, what a function is in JavaScript is, for lack of better words, it's a variable. So anything that you do with a regular variable, you can do with a function. You can return a function from a function. All right. You can call a function from a function. All right. You can set a variable, equal to a function, and a function equal to a variable. All right. So what you'll see when you go through there are examples of each one of these. All right. And it's not important that you memorize these, but it's important to realize that if you have to use them, where to go in order to be able to find the information to use them. That's what's more important to me. I mean, with 309 of the things that are in here, I mean, if somebody told me that they had memorized and knew every one, I guess I'd believe them. But my question would be, more or less, would be why? All right. Sometimes the act of being a good programmer is to just know where to go to get the information that you need. All right. All right. So then they jump in on page 199, introducing jQuery objects. As they mention here, what a jQuery object is it's a wrapper around a set of DOM elements. All right. It says they're still JavaScript objects, but they oftentimes provide a more easy way, an effective way to go and do the same thing. Whereas in here, some of this stuff can be clunky. All right. And in here, typically, not so clunky. All right. So notice it says here, HTML gets the inner HTML of an object or sets it to an optional new HTML. What that means is the HTML that you see in here in jQuery is the equivalent of inner HTML that you use in the regular DOM. So there's a lot of mapping that's going on in between these. And again, which one should you use? Yeah, whichever one makes more sense to you is the one that you should be using. And there's a lot of different things in here. All right, if you need the value of something, you use the val property. ATTR allows you to get or set the value of an attribute. Add a class does just that. And as you might guess, they don't show it in the chart here, but if there's an add class, there's a remove class. All right. CSS, if you want to take and grab any CSS property and assign it. That's what I showed you in the first examples when I said doing it the jQuery way. I used the .css, all right, and I used it both on the body and I used it on the H1 tag. Click, all right, and this is a little bit special here because if you notice, there's a click event here. It enables you to execute or change the event handler, when the event is clicked. Okay, there's also a click here. But what this click has is it basically has something in it that you don't have in its DOM equivalent. In that click event, what you can also put in there at the end of your click event is something that's called a callback, which means that you put a function in there, you put a function in your click event, and then when that function executes, you can put in another function. All right? Maybe you just want something as simple as an alert to come up that says, now we're done. Or it could be that you want, once that happens, you want something else to happen. Hide and show, hopefully by now people understand that stuff. All right? One thing that's kind of changed over time and with jQuery is with hide and show, when you look at a lot of sites, what they do is they fade in, they fade out, and they do a lot of cool special effects. They do a lot of stuff that in the past, it was not recommended that you do. All right, in the past, it was always the recommendation was, you can gray something out, you can disable it, but you really shouldn't make it disappear. All right, because that's too confusing for the user. Now it's cool for the user. So as times change, all right, just like I guess it's cool to be a 74-year-old guy running for president. All right? All right. How to determine whether an object is DOM or jQuery. Notice what you can do. You can say if the name of the object .jQuery. You could do something as simple as put an alert after that. And if indeed that alert fired, you'd know it was a jQuery object. On the other hand, if you say if followed by the name of your object .node type and you put an alert there, then it's a DOM object. Remember, all a jQuery object is it's a DOM object kind of put in a wrapper so you're able to do jQuery stuff with it. So you can change a jQuery object to a DOM object and back again. Do you have to do that? Probably not. But the point is, what they're showing you there is that it is possible to do that if you want to or need to. That's on the top of page 201. All right. Find DOM objects by ID. See, notice when you do this. All right, find DOM objects by ID right there. And they show you an example. This is similar to what I showed you before. Most developers over time have said, this is too clunky a way to do this. It makes you have to put IDs around everything. I don't want to do that. It's too hard. It's too much to type. So they came up with jQuery to shorten that. All right, so when you look at this, I mean, and it's important enough to show it to you, that if you do this, all right, the way that you replace that with jQuery is you say var container obj equals $container. And you have to be able to understand that. All right? That the second way is just a shortcut for the first way. And as you can see, it's a lot less typing. All right? But it's doing the same thing. If you actually go out, and I did this, if you go out and bring up the non-minified version of jQuery, what you'll find is they alias. They say, okay, I'm going to do this type of thing, and it's an alias for boom. Then they put down the actual stuff that's happening behind the scenes. That's what a lot of the jQuery file itself is it's just aliasing. All right? All right, not only is there get element by ID, but there's get elements by class name. There's also get elements by tag name. All right? But again, this is the more old-fashioned way of doing it. It's still fine to do it that way. But to many people, jQuery has replaced doing this. All right, so the first example that they put in here, this example is on pages 202, 203, and 204. And it's, again, it's not a great example, it's not a bad example, but let's take a quick look at it. Someplace in here I've got it. All right. So what I just did was in this box, when I ran this, there's nothing there. So if I put in here, I like cake. All right, you can see what happens. Okay, it's updating a paragraph here and a paragraph here, and I think this is a span or a div. I don't remember. We're going to look at it in just a second. All right, but the point is the code that's in there is not that big a stuff. All right, well, I guess that we don't want that. That's the running version. All right. So if we look at this, what do we have? All right. Pretty simple interface. All right. We're adding our own file in here, our own JS or JavaScript file. We're adding our own CSS file in here. But the actual body is very small. All right. ID equal text in, type equal text. All right, fine. Button equal on click. Text change. All right, so when you click it, we're going to call this text change, which is defined inside of here that we'll look at in just a second. All right, and its name is update. You'll notice that right now, This is the blank stuff that comes up, that doesn't come up, and basically there's nothing in it. But when we run this, we're going to end up putting something in here to fill up that span, in here to fill up that span, in here to fill up that paragraph, and in here to fill up that paragraph. All right? I wish the author had kind of spaced this out a little bit. In fact, I will. All right, so if we take a look at what's going on in here, okay? In element, document.getElement by ID text in. So what is text in? When we come back here and we look, there's text in. All right, that's the text that we're putting into that text box. All right, out elements, document.getElements by tag name, because there's two of them. That's the two paragraphs here and here. All right. Heading elements. Get elements by class name. So where's the class of heading? That's here and that's here. So you'll notice in here we could have done this two ways. At least. They use class name in here because he's trying to use a little bit of everything. But there's a lot of different ways that this could have been done. All right? Then what he's doing in here is he's just iterating through the list. So he says, okay, once you put that stuff in there, grab whatever's in out elements I and copy it into out item. All right. And then what ends up happening is this says update paragraph 1 to whatever we put that value in. Upgrade paragraph 2 to whatever we put that value to. And this comes in and it copies that information. All right. The out element, it copies it, that copies it to our paragraphs. And this is basically going to take it and put it into our headings. All right. So again, if I run this, what's going to happen here when I click update is the paragraphs are going to be filled in with hello, and those two spans are going to be filled in with hello. So notice it says updating 1 and updating 2. And it does that because when we did this, we said I plus 1. Otherwise, it would have said updating 0 and updating 1. Not that that's a big thing one way or the other. But you should be able to look at this, and it should make sense to you. All right. Again, if it doesn't, key it in. Take a look at it. Key it in yourselves. Change it around a little bit and see what happens when you do that. And again, as always, after they show it to you and they show you the results, they give you all the code. So it's right here. All right, there's your HTML. There's your JS. And there is your CSS. All right. Now, most of the rest of the chapter then, starting on page 205, are just, we're going to go over the one other example that's in here, but it's table after table after table of stuff from the api.jquery.com file. All right, so again, there's just a lot of stuff in there. All right. So it says, unlike JavaScript, jQuery enables you to find HTML elements in countless ways using CSS selectors. All right, most of the jQuery selectors were taken directly from CSS. So again, you've got to know what this means. That line that's in blue right there, that has to make sense to you. That's a jQuery statement that says I want to find the ID that's called my element. All right, and I'm not just going to do that. I'm going to add something to that. All right. Again, that's pretty much where I went into to grab all that stuff. So again, table after table. So what's nice about this, not this example, but most of them show examples afterwards. Now, are you going to use the star a lot? Probably not, but you could. That's the point. So if you put $, and you literally put the name of a class in here, that's going to find everything that's of that class. And there's an example. That'll find everything or the element with that ID. So that'll find the ID of menu. All right? An individual element. So I could put anything I wanted in here. I could put H1 in there, and it would find all H1 tags. All right? And it's important to realize, I think it's important for you to settle on a standard, but it doesn't matter if you put single quotes or double quotes in here. If you read enough books, half of them will say it one way and half of them will say it the other way. Another really important thing is this right here. This last example. This says it's a UL, but it has to have a class of big lists. All right, so you start seeing that when you go through it. Then they go through with attributes, and they show you a bunch of different ways that you can set attributes. All right, the good news is a lot of the stuff that's in here you've looked at already because we've gone through regular expressions. So you know that when something starts with a caret like that, it means begins with. You know that if something has a $sign in it, it means ends with. All right? You know equality and inequality. But again, I've got an example of each one of these in here. All right? So this is table 7.4. So if I wanted contains, all right, kind of a dumb example, but it's the one that they provided here on the api.jquery.com. What I did in here was I took this all right from the site. So there's the URL, there's the description they gave. At the bottom, they always put an example, so I grabbed the text from there and I threw in the exact example. So in other words, in here, what they're saying is search all these inputs, and if it has the word man in it anywhere, show it to me. So you'll notice that one does, that one does, that one does, and the last one does not. And there you see it. All right. They follow that up with another chart right away, or table. All right. Contains, has, empty, and parent. Sometimes I went and put even more in some of these than were shown here. There's a lot of different things that you can do with parents, for example. All right. So notice empty selects elements that have no content. Parent is the opposite of that. All right. It selects elements that have at least something in them. And notice that in here, at least with these, they all start with a colon. There is hierarchical. Again, this stuff is taken directly from the way it's done using CSS. All right. The greater than sign selects elements with a specific parent type, and there is an example. The plus sign selects elements followed by a specific type of element, and there is an example. The tilde selects elements that are after. And there's examples of each one of them. The form stuff, again, starts with colon. All right. And there are more things that are in here. This is not meant to be an exhaustive set. Visibility, that's pretty simple. Visible or hidden. All right. And some of the filtered selections. Okay. And remember, because it looks weird, the even look like the odd because the even starts with 0. So it'll show you 0, 2, 4, 6. All right, because we start counting with 0, and the odd will show you 1, 3, 5, etc. All right, and there's so many ways you can do the same thing in here. You can use equal, greater than, less than, etc. Okay, and again, I mean, some of the stuff, the examples in here, for example, this animated one, just to show you this, they're kind of, I was going to say silly, stupid, whatever you want to say. but it says animate one of these. Then when you click run, change the color, but just to the one that's being animated. And not only change it, toggle it. So it's pretty obvious what's going on right there. And you can do that with almost no code whatsoever. All right. And the last example that's in here, I think it's a pretty good one. Says use Jquery to access DOM objects. What they end up doing in here, maybe the one maybe this is the one I'm thinking of is in the next chapter, but we'll see. All right. Now this, okay. Find all the even ones. This wasn't the good one. Notice what it did there was it took all the even ones, so that's 0, 2, 4, and 6, and bolded them. Take the odd ones, all right, 1, 3, 5, and 7, and bold those. Grab just the first 4, which is 0, 1, 2, and 3. All right. That's it for that chapter. So it's taking a little longer than I thought, but let's take a break. It's 10:46. Let's come back at 11, and we'll go over chapter 8. It's a shorter chapter. There's only 2 or 3 tables that are in there.